All right, good morning. We are beginning today with the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, Skandha 2, Chapter 5. Continuing with summarizing some of the background genealogy leading up to the Mahabharata, the descendants of Vyasadeva and the ancestry of the Pandavas and some of their relatives. The Rishi said, "O son of Lomaharshana, O Sutta, you have described to us how the 8 Vasus cursed by Vasishta took their birth and how Bhishma was born. O knower of Dharma, now describe to us in detail how the greatly religious king Santanu married the auspicious Yojana Gandha, the chaste Satyavati, the mother of Vyasa, knowing full well that she was a fisherman's daughter. O Suvrata, remove this our doubt." The point being, it's unusual for a king to marry a fisherman's daughter and not a noblewoman. Sutta then said, "The sagely king Shantanu always used to go to forests on hunting expeditions, with his heart addicted to hunting buffaloes, deer, and various other wild animals. Thus, for 4 years, that king went out a hunting with his son." Meaning, of course, he didn't go for a 4-year expedition, but 4 years went by since Bhishma was born. And during which time the king periodically went hunting. With his son Bhishma, hunting deer and other wild animals, and got the highest happiness as Mahadeva finds in company with Kartikeya. Father and son hunting together. Of course, Bhishma is a very little child, so he himself is not hunting, but he's being brought along with his father. Once on an occasion, while he was shooting arrows at rhinoceros and boar, he went so far as to reach a forest on the banks of the Yamuna, that chief of rivers. There he began to smell an excellent, nice smell that could not be described in words. He tried to find out the source, and wandered here and there and on all sides of the forest, and thought that this enchanting smell was not that of mandara flowers, musk, champaka, nor that of malati, nor that of the ketaki flower. The air was blowing saturated with a peculiar fragrant smell that he had never experienced before. Thus thinking of that smell, the king Shantanu, being enchanted, followed it to its source in that forest. At last he came to a spot on the banks of the Yamuna, chief of rivers, where a very beautiful girl, calm and quiet, and with feminine gestures, and an amorous posture, lovely but ill-clad, was sitting. Ill-clad meaning poorly clad, that she was wearing the cheap garments of a poor person. And he found out that the beautiful smell was coming out of her body. The form of the lady was extremely beautiful. The smell was very wonderful and captivating the hearts of all. Her age had entered to youth, and she was very auspicious, meaning she was a young adult. The king was greatly surprised and was eager to know who the lady was, whence she had come, whether she was a Deva girl, or a human, or a Gandharva's daughter, or a Naga's daughter. But being unable to come to a definite conclusion and being passionate, he remembered Ganga and asked that lady sitting on the bank of the Yumna. Yumna is like a shortened form of Yamuna. Asked her thus, "Oh dear, who are you? Whose daughter are you? Why are you alone in this lovely forest? Oh beautiful-eyed one, are you married, or are you as yet unmarried? Answer to all these. O lovely-eyed one, seeing your lovely enchanting form, I am become extremely passionate. So, oh dear, describe in detail to me who are you, and what do you intend to do?" When the king spoke thus, the lotus-eyed, nice-teethed lady replied as follows, "O king, know me as a fisherman's daughter, and I am completely under my father's command. O king of kings, for Dharma's sake, I carry the ferry across this Yamuna river. My father has gone today to our house. O master of wealth, thus I have spoken truth to you." Thus saying, the lady desisted. The passionate king then spoke to her. "I am the foremost hero of the Kuru family, so choose me as your husband. Then this youth of yours will not go in vain. O fawn-eyed one, I have no other wife existing." He phrases that carefully because he had another wife, but she has left him. "So you will be my legal wife. O dear, passion is giving much pains to me, therefore I am now become your obedient servant forever. O beloved, my former dear wife has abandoned me and gone away, but I have not married since then. Now seeing you, beautiful one, beautiful in all respects, I cannot bring my mind under control. Hearing these nectar-like beautiful words of the king, the sweet-scented fisherman's daughter, though also turned extremely passionate for him, had patience and said, O king, I also desire that which you have expressed. I am of opinion to act according to your wishes, but what am I to do? I am not independent, you are to know this. My father alone can give me in marriage to you, so you had better ask my father for me. Though I am a fisherman's daughter, still I am not wanton and willful. I am always obedient to my father. If my father wills, you can marry me, and I will be obedient to you. O king, the god of love is tormenting me, who is endowed with youth. He does not torment you so much. In other words, she, however attracted to her, she is expressing that she is even more attracted to him. Still, I must regard my family manners and customs coming down from ancient times. I must hold my patience. Sutta said. Thus passionately pleased with these fascinating words of the lady, the king went to the fisherman's house for the lady. Seeing the king coming, the fisherman was greatly bewildered and astonished, and bowed down with great devotion, and said, O king, I am thy servant. I am blessed with thy presence. O great king, now be graciously pleased to order me the cause of thy arrival. Hearing the fisherman's words, the king said, O sinless one, this I tell you truly, that if you give me your daughter in marriage, I will certainly make her my legal wife. The fisherman replied, O king, what must be given ever, how can I say that it is not to be given? Therefore, if thou askest for my daughter, I will certainly give her to thee. But, O great king, thou wilt have to make her son the king of thy kingdom. No other son of thine could be king after thy absence. Here he evidently sees an opportunity to try to elevate his own family's position. Hearing these words of the fisherman, the king Shantanu became very anxious. He remembered Gangeya, another name of Bhishma, his eldest son and his heir, and could not speak anything. He, being sick with love, anxiously returned home, deciding not to marry her. But he abandoned bathing, eating, sleeping, etc., being unable to think of anything but her. At this, his son, Gangeya Bhishma, whose vow was equal to that of the gods, whose vow, meaning whose resolve was equal to that of the gods, marking that the king was being troubled with some thought, went to him and asked why he was anxious. O king, say truly, what is your anxiety? Who is your enemy that is not conquered? Whom do you want to bring under your control? O king, what use is there of having a son who does not understand the difficulties of his father or does not try to remove these difficulties? A son can be called truly a son who is born to repay the debts incurred by him in previous births. There is no manner of discussion in this. See, Raghu's son, Dasharati Ram, abandoned his kingdom under the orders of his father and repaired to Chitrakuta forest with his brother Lakshman and wife Sita. The son of King Harishchandra, Rohita, ready to repay the debt of his father and sold by his father as a slave, worked as a servant at a Brahman's house. So the famous Shunashepa, sold by his high-souled father Ajigarta, was tied for sacrifice on a sacrificial post, but he was afterwards freed by the Gadhi's son Vishvamitra. It is well known that in ancient days, the Jamadagni's son Parashuram cut off his mother's head under the orders of his father. He considered his father's words more important and hence did such an unjust act, anything that his father said. O king, this my body is at your disposal. I can certainly do what you order me to do. So say, what am I to do? As long as I am living, you need not express any sorrow. If you permit, I will do what is even hardly practicable to do. O king, say why you are anxious. I will remove that at once with this bow in my hand. If my body goes in carrying your mandate, know that, meaning if I die trying to do what you have ordered, know that your desire will be fructified. Fie to that son who, being capable, is averse to do what his father desires. What use is there in having a son who does not remove the cause of his father's anxiety? Hearing the words of his son, the king Shantanu felt much ashamed in his heart and said, O son, this is now my gravest care, that you are my only son. Besides, you are a hero, very powerful, honored and never showing your back in battles. Therefore, if out of ill luck you become dead in some battlefield, I will become issueless. Under such circumstances, what am I to do? So, O son, my life is fruitless when I have got only one son. This is my gravest care. Therefore, I am sorry. O son, I have no other cares that I can mention to you. Hearing these words of the father, Gangaya called the old ministers and said that the king was too ashamed to speak out to me the real matter. So I ask you all to find out exactly the king's cares and communicate them to me as they are. I can carry them out without any hitch then. At these words of Bhishma, the ministers went to the king and learned the true cause and spoke to Bhishma. Learning this, he began to think what ought to be done. The son of Ganga, Bhishma, then, accompanied by the ministers, quickly went to the house of the fisherman. And with words of humility and affection, they spoke. Bhishma spoke. O tormentor of foes, he rather amusingly uses this royal warrior's term of address to the fisherman, who most likely is not tormenting anything but fish. I pray to you to give your beautiful daughter in marriage to my father. Your daughter will be my mother, and I will be her servant. The fisherman then said, O highly lucky prince, then the king's son will not be able to become king in your presence. So kindly marry yourself, my daughter. So that way, the fisherman is trying to get his family line into the royal inheritance. At this, Bhishma again said, let your daughter be my mother. I will never accept the kingdom. The son of your daughter will no doubt become king. The fisherman said, I know your words are true, meaning that I know you mean them. But if your son be powerful, he can take forcibly the kingdom for himself. At this, Bhishma again said, O sire, know my words as true. I will never marry. From today I have accepted this difficult vow. Suta said, hearing this firm resolve of Bhishma, the fisherman gave over his beautiful daughter to the king Shantanu. Thus Shantanu married the dear Satyavati, but he was quite unaware of the wonderful birth of Vyasadeva, which had already occurred from her before this point. Thus ends the 5th chapter of the 2nd Skandha on the marriage of Satyavati and the Mahapurana Srimad Devi Bhagavatam of 18,000 verses. Chapter 6. Suta said, thus Shantanu married Satyavati. 2 sons were born to her, and they died in course of time. Out of Vyasadeva's semen, Dhritarashtra was born. Ambika Devi, the mother of Dhritarashtra, closed her eyes on seeing Vedavyasa, hence Dhritarashtra was born blind. The princess Ambalika, mother of Pandu, turned pale at the sight of Vyasa, hence her son became of a pale color, out of Vyasa's wrath. Hence the name of the son was Pandu, the pale one. Next, the maidservant, expert in the science of amorous pleasures, satisfied Vyasa. Hence her son Vidura was born of Dharma's Ansha and became truthful and holy. Though Pandu was younger, the ministers installed him on the throne. Dhritarashtra could not become king, it was deemed, as he was blind. By the permission of Bhishma, the powerful Pandu obtained the sovereignty, and the intelligent Vidura became his minister, his half-brother Vidura. Dhritarashtra, the blind prince, the king's brother, had 2 wives, Gandhari and Sovali. This Sovali was a Vaishya. She was engaged in the household affairs. The king Pandu, so saying she was a Vaishya engaged in the household affairs means she was managing the household's finances and so on. The king Pandu had 2 wives too. The first was Kunti, the daughter of Shurasena, and the other was Madri, the daughter of the Madra king. Gandhari gave birth to 100 beautiful sons. There's a whole story told in the Mahabharata about how that came to be, how it was that she miraculously had 100 sons. But we are summarizing over some of the details here that are told in depth in the Mahabharata. The Vaishya princess Sauvali gave birth to one beautiful son named Yuyutsu. While Kunti was a virgin, meaning while she was unmarried, she gave birth through the medium of the sun to the lovely Karna. So through the medium of the sun means the father was Surya Deva, the sun god. Next, she became the wife of Pandu. Hearing this, Rishi said, "O Munisutta, what are you saying? First Kunti brought forth a child, and afterwards she was married to Pandu. This is wonderful indeed. How was Karna born of Kunti unmarried? And how came Kunti to be married afterwards? Describe all these in detail." Sutta then said, "O Dvijas, while Shurasena's daughter Kunti was a virgin girl, the king Kunti Bhoja asked for Kunti that she might become his girl, meaning and Shurasena gave her to the king Kunti Bhoja, who brought up this beautifully smiling girl. So what happened here was the king Kunti Bhoja wished to adopt Kunti from his friend Shurasena. And so due to their, it's a long story that is told in detail in the Mahabharata, but due to their family situations and so on, Shurasena, Kunti's father, gave her to his friend Kunti Bhoja to adopt as his daughter, and he raised her instead. He put to her the service of Agni, of Agnihotra, so that she was studying as an assistant in yajnas. Once on an occasion, Durvasa Muni engaged in a vow lasting for 4 months, the Chaturmasya Vrata, came there. Kunti served him during that period as his assistant. The Muni became greatly pleased and gave her a very auspicious mantra, by virtue of which any deva, when called upon by that mantra, would come to Kunti and satisfy her desires, which is indeed meant as a euphemism. When the Muni went away, Kunti, remaining in her house, wanted to test the efficacy of the mantra and asked within herself which devata to call upon. Seeing the god Surya had arisen in the sky, Kunti uttered the mantra and invoked him. Surya then, assuming an excellent human form, came down from the heavens and appeared before Kunti in the same room. Seeing the Surya Deva, Kunti became greatly surprised and began to shudder, and instantly became endowed with the inherent natural quality of passion. Beautiful-eyed Kunti, with folded palms, spoke to Surya Deva standing before her. "I am highly pleased today seeing thy form. Now go back to thy sphere," she says nervously, having summoned him. Surya Deva said, "O Kunti, what did you call me for by virtue of the mantra? Calling me, why do you not worship me, standing before you? O beautiful dark one, seeing you I have become passionate, so come to me. By means of the mantra you have made me subservient, so take me for intercourse." Hearing this, Kunti said, "O witness of all, O knower of dharma, you know that I am an unmarried girl. O Suvrata, I bow down to you. I am a family daughter, so do not speak ill to me." Surya then said, "If I go away in vain, I will be an object of great shame, and no doubt will be laughed at amongst the gods. So, O Kunti, if you do not satisfy me, I will immediately curse you and the Brahman who has given you this mantra. O beautiful one, if you satisfy me, your virginity will remain. Nobody will come to know it, and there will be born a son born to you exactly like me in glory and power." Thus saying, Surya Deva enjoyed the bashful Kunti with her mind attracted towards him. In other words, that she was indeed, she was somewhat nervous, but she was indeed very attracted towards him. He granted her the desired boons and went away. The beautiful Kunti became pregnant and began to remain in a house under great secrecy. Only the dear nurse knew that. Her mother or any other person was quite unaware of the fact of her miraculous pregnancy. In time, a very beautiful son, like a second sun or Kartikeya, decked with a lovely kavacha coat of mail and 2 earrings, was born there. So in other words, again, all of this is told in much greater detail in the Mahabharata, but her son was born with armor and earrings attached to his body, grown onto him like skin, golden armor of the sun, and 2 earrings were grown into his ears. Then the nurse caught the hand of the bashful Kunti and said, "O charming one, what care can you possibly have as long as I am living?" Kunti then placed the son in a box and said, "O son, what shall I do? Being afraid of shame, I am leaving you, though you are dear to me as my life itself. I am exceedingly unfortunate that I am casting aside this all-auspicious son. May the Nirguna Bhagavati Ambika, the world mother and the lady of all, endowed with attributes, so in saguna form, protect thee. May Katyayani, the giver of all desires, feed you with her milk. Alas, I am quitting you, born of Surya's semen in this solitary forest, like a vitiated wanton woman. I do not know how, when I shall see your lotus-like beautiful face, dearest to me like myself. Alas, I never worshipped in my former birth Shivani, the mother of the three worlds. I never meditated on her lotus-like feet, the giver of all happiness. Hence I am so very unfortunate. O dear son, I must perform great tapasya to expiate for this terrible sin that I knowingly commit in relinquishing you in the forest." Sutta said, thus saying this to her son within the casket, Kunti gave over the container, it says casket, but more accurately, a basket, gave that over to the hands of her nurse, terrified lest someone might see her. Kunti then bathed and remained with a fearful heart in her father's house. A charioteer. So the translator has added a note here. The text of the Devi Bhagavatam as we have it reads a carpenter. This, however, is an error. He was a charioteer, and there must be an error in the manuscript. Named Adhirata, got by chance that basket floating in the Ganga. And his wife, whose name was Radha, no relation to Krishna's Radha, but a woman of the same name, prayed for the son and nourished him under her care. Thus nourished in the charioteer's house, the famous Kunti's son Karna became a very powerful warrior. The king Pandu then married Kunti in a Svayamvara, a marriage in which the girl chooses her husband from among a number of suitors assembled together. And the all-auspicious daughter of the king of Madra became the second wife of Pandu. Once on an occasion, the powerful Pandu, while hunting in the forest, killed a muni in the form of a deer engaged in the act of sexual intercourse, thinking it to be a deer. So, again, we're going quickly through a bunch of long stories explained in the Mahabharata, but the Muni, who had the power to turn into a deer, had indeed turned into a stag and was currently having sex with a deer when the king shot him and killed him. The dying Muni, becoming inflated with wrath, cursed Pandu. If you cohabit, certainly you will die. In other words, he will die if he ever has sex with anyone. Thus cursed by the Muni, Pandu became very, very sorrowful and abandoned his kingdom and began to live in the forest. O Munis, his two wives, Kunti and Madri, followed their husband, as chaste women do, to serve him in the forest. Dwelling in the hermitage of the Munis, Pandu listened to the Dharmashastras and practiced severe penance, attempting to expiate the sin of his having murdered a Muni in the forest, though it was a mistake. Once, while he was listening to the religious discourses of the Munis in the forest ashram, he heard unmistakably the Munis telling that the man who is sonless can never go to Svarga, so he must get a son somehow or other. The Pandits declare that the sons born of the father's semen, the sons born of their daughters, the Kshetraja, the Goloka, the Kunda, the Sahoda, the Kanina, the Krita, one obtained in the forest, or one offered by another father unable to nourish his son, all are entitled to inherit the wealth of the father, but the sons enumerated successively are more and more inferior. In other words, so they're going through the Dharma Shastras, and so this is a summary of inheritance law, of adopted sons, sons of someone not your wife, etc., and the sequence of inheritance is what they're going through here. Hearing this, Pandu spoke to the lotus-eyed Kunti to procreate sons for him, soon by a great ascetic Muni. and said to her, by my order, you will not incur any sin in doing this, in have sex with a Muni in the ashram to become pregnant, and then Pandu will raise that as his son, since he is cursed, that if he tries to conceive a son with her, he will die. He said to her, I heard that in ancient times, the high-souled king Sodasa got a son in this way from Vashishta. Kunti then spoke to the king, O Lord, I know one Siddha mantra. It was given to me before by the Muni Durvasa. Whichever devata I will invoke by that mantra, he will instantly come to my side, controlled by that mantra. And the implication being the devata will impregnate her. At the request of her husband, Kunti invoked Dharma, the best of the devas, and after being impregnated by him, gave birth to Yudhishthira. Then she got through Pavana Deva, the son of Vragodara. So Dharma Deva is another name of Yama Deva, father of Yudhishthira. Pavana Deva means the wind, another name of Vayu, and Vrakodara means wolf belly, and it is a famous other name of the Pandava, most often called by the name of Bhima. And through Indra, the lord of the Devas, she had the son Arjuna. Thus, once in every year, Kunti gave birth to one son, and so in 3 years she gave birth to 3 very powerful and mighty sons. At this point, Madri spoke to her husband, O king, the best of the Kurus, what shall I do now? Kindly suggest to me the means of procreating sons. O Lord, remove my pain, because she too wants children. Pandu asked Kunti for this. Kunti, moved with pity, gave Madri the mantra so that she might get one son. Then the beautiful Madri invoked the twin Ashvins under the advice of her husband and got a pair of twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, through them. O Munis, thus the 5 Pandavas were born successively and every following year to the wives of Pandu by the seeds of the Devas. Once on a time, Pandu, whose end was drawing nigh, not that he knew this, but he is by fate, became very passionate at the sight of Madri in that solitary hermitage. He, though repeatedly forbidden by Madri, since she knows that if he touches her sexually, he will die, warmly embraced her as if dictated by the great destroyer, and fell to the ground. As the creeper falls down when the tree is felled, so Madri dropped on the ground and began to cry violently in grief at her husband's death. Having heard the wailings of Madri, Kunti and the 5 sons of Pandu came there, weeping and crying. A tumult then ensued, and the great Munis also appeared on the scene. Then the Munis, practicing great vows, knew that Pandu was dead, and performed duly, on the banks of the Ganga, the ceremony of burning the dead. At that time, Madri gave over to Kunti the charge of her 2 sons and followed the sati practice along with her husband to go to Satyaloka. The Munis then performed Tarpana ceremonies in honor of Pandu and Madri, and took Kunti and the 5 sons to Hastinapura, to the city of Hastinapura. Knowing that Kunti had come, Bhishma, Vidura, and the relatives of Dhritarashtra within the city all came to Kunti. They all asked Kunti, O beautiful one, whose are these 5 sons? Kunti then remembered the curse on Pandu and sorrowfully expressed, these are the Deva's sons born into the Kuru family. In order to convince the people assembled there, Kunti invoked the Devas, who came in the celestial space, visibly in the sky above the city of Hastinapura, and said, yes, these are the sons born of our seeds. Bhishma then paid respect to the words of the Devas and duly honored the boys. Bhishma then took the 5 sons and Pandu's wife to Hastina. So in other words, they were already in Hastinapura, but took them in there, into his house there, gave them housing in the palace, and gladly nourished them as members of the royal family. O Munis, the sons of Prita were thus born and nourished by Bhishma. Prita is another name of Kunti. Thus ends the 6th chapter of the 2nd Adhyaya on the birth of the Pandavas in the Mahapuranam Srimad Devi Bhagavatam. Chapter 7. Sutta said, the chaste Draupadi was the common wife of all the 5 very beautiful sons of Kunti, and she bore 5 sons, one to every husband. Arjuna had one wife more. She was Subhadra, the sister of Sri Krishna. By the order of Sri Krishna, Arjuna stole her away in the Kshatriya mode of marriage. The great hero Abhimanyu was born of Subhadra. This Abhimanyu and the 5 sons of Draupadi were all killed in battle. Abhimanyu's wife Uttara was the charming daughter of the king Virat. She gave birth to one dead child. After all the boys, the descendants of the family, were extinct. The above child died in her womb out of the cursed arrows of Ashvatthama. The extraordinarily powerful Sri Krishna himself made alive again this his sister's dead grandson. As this son was born after the family had become extinct, he became known in the world by the name of Parikshit and was resurrected in his mother's womb by Krishna. When the sons were all destroyed, Dhritarashtra became very sorry and, tormented by the arrow-like words of Bhima, remained in the kingdom of the Pandavas. Gandhari, too, exceedingly distressed on the bereavement of the sons, in other words, at the death of all of her sons in the Great War, remained there also. Yudhishthira day and night served Dhritarashtra and Gandhari as honored guests, despite them having been his lifelong enemies before the war. The greatly religious Vidura always used to console, by the advice of Yudhishthira, his brother Dhritarashtra. Vidura possessed the eye of wisdom, and he remained by his brother's side. Dharma's son Yudhishthira used to serve his uncle Dhritarashtra in such a way as he might forget the pain of the death of his sons. But Bhima used to pierce Dhritarashtra's heart by his arrow-like words that he pronounced so loud as to reach the ears of the old king. Bhima used to say, "In the battlefield I killed all the sons of the wicked blind king, and it was I that sucked well and drunk full to the brim the blood of the heart of Dushasana. Now this blind king eats shamelessly like a crow and a dog the mass of food given by me, and thus is bearing uselessly the burden of life." Daily Bhima used to tell harsh words like this to him, whereas the religious Yudhishthira used to console him, saying Bhima is a quite illiterate brute and so forth, when he would overhear Bhima saying these things. There is, of course, the whole backstory of their lifelong enmity, which is why Bhima wants to cause pain to Dhritarashtra and hates him so much, and so thus says such things. Yes, okay, so we have a question. So it's written here that Parikshit was born dead, but in the Srimad Bhagavata Mahapurana, it's written that Parikshit was dead in the womb. Yes, so gave birth to one dead child, and Krishna revived him. So, two possibilities here. This is not, the story here is not told in great detail. So gave birth to a dead child could be a brief way of saying, and also if one examined that phrase in Sanskrit, it could clarify it. It could refer to gave birth to a child who had died, but the death and resurrection occurred in the womb, not after the death. But also, as we will see in coming chapters, there are clear differences in the life of Parikshit in this Purana versus in the Bhagavata Purana. And the different Puranas explicitly say that they refer to cycles of events in different kalpas. And so this Purana and the Devi Bhagavatam and the regular Bhagavatam do refer to different cycles of these events. And so there may in fact be some differences. And indeed, particularly in the death story of Parikshit, there are explicit differences that we will see coming up. The king Dhritarashtra remained there with a grieved heart for 18 years after the war. Then one day he proposed to Yudhishthira, the son of Dharma, about his intention to dwell in the forest. He said, "Today I wish to perform tarpanas in the names of my sons. True it is that Bhima performed the funeral rites of them all, but having in view of the former enmity, he did not do anything for my sons. In other words, he did the rites without any kind of love or affection or actual well wishes for them, but only because it was his duty. If you give me some money, I will then perform the funeral rites of my sons, and then retire to the forest to perform tapasya so that I can go to Svarga. Vidura also asked Yudhishthira privately to pay to Dhritarashtra the sum that he wanted to pay for the funeral rites and for his travels. Yudhishthira also intended to pay the required money. Then Yudhishthira, the lord of the world, called his younger brothers and addressed them as follows. O highly fortunate ones, our revered uncle is desirous to perform the funeral rites of his sons, so we will have to give him some money for the purpose. Hearing these words of his elder brother of indomitable valor, Pavana's son, the mighty armed Bhima, became very angry and spoke out as follows. O highly lucky one, is it that we will have to give wealth for the spiritual benefit of Duryodhana and others? What a great stupidity can there be? What a greater stupidity couldn't there be than the fact that such a malevolent, blind king is deriving such great happiness at your hands? O Arya, it is by your bad counsel that we suffered endless troubles in the forest, and the extremely good Draupadi was brought before the public in the hall by Dushasana. O one of good vows, it is for your satisfaction alone that we, though we are very mighty, had to remain in the house of Matya Raja Virata as servants. Had you not been our elder brother, and not been addicted to gambling, would it have been possible that I, who killed Jarasandha, would have been a cook to Virata Raja? Never we had been put to so great a trouble. Never would the mighty armed Arjuna, the Vasava's son, have acted the part of an actress, dressing himself in a female garb under the name Vrihannala. Alas, what more painful fate could there be by assuming a human birth, that the hands of Arjuna that wielded always the Gandiva bow would have worn bracelets befitting a woman? I would have been happy then had I, seeing the braid of hair on Arjuna's head and the collyrium in his eyes, cut off the head of Dhritarashtra. O Lord of the earth, without asking you, I set fire to the house named Jatugriha, and therefore the vicious Virochana who wanted to burn us was himself burnt up. Again, O Lord of men, similarly, without asking you, I slew Kichaka. This is now the one thing I regret, that I could not have killed in the same way, in other words, without asking your permission. The sons of Dhritarashtra, before all the hall in public. O King of Kings, it was simply your stupidity that you liberated Duryodhana and the other sons, the great enemies of the Gandharvas, when they had been imprisoned by them. Again today you are willing to give wealth for the spiritual benefit of those Duryodhana and others. But, O Lord of the earth, I would never give wealth, even if you request me specially to do so. Thus saying, Bhima walked away. Dharma's son Yudhishthira then consulted with the other three brothers, and the four of them gave an abundance of wealth to Dhritarashtra. With this son, Ambika's son, Dhritarashtra, duly performed the Shraddha ceremony of his sons, and gave away lots of things to the Brahmanas. The king Dhritarashtra, thus performing all the funeral obsequies, became ready to go early to the forest with Gandhari, Kunti, and Vidura. By the help of Sanjaya, the highly intelligent Dhritarashtra became informed of the roads of the forest, and then went out of the house. Shurasena's daughter Kunti, though stopped by her sons, followed them. So meaning though stopped by her sons, meaning though they tried to stop her, they asked her not to go, but she wanted to go. She too is ready to take sannyas and leave the world. Bhima and other Kauravas went along with them weeping up to the banks of the Ganga, and thence returned to Hastinapura. The ascetics went to the auspicious Shatayupa hermitage, Shatayupa ashram, on the banks of the Ganga, and building a hut to dwell in there, practiced tapasya with their hearts concentrated. Thus 6 years elapsed, when Yudhishthira, troubled by their bereavement, said to his younger brothers, I dreamt that our mother Kunti got very lean and thin. Now my mind wants bitterly to see my mother, uncle, aunt, the high-souled Vidura, and the highly intelligent Sanjaya. If you approve, I want to go there and visit them. Then all 5 brothers, Pandu's sons, became desirous to see Kunti, and taking with them Draupadi, Subhadra, Uttara, and other persons, went to the Shatayupa ashram, and saw the people there, but not seeing Vidura, Yudhishthira asked, where is Vidura? Hearing this, Dhritarashtra said, Vidura has taken up Vairagyam and has gone alone to a solitary place and is meditating in his heart on the eternal Brahman. The next day, while the king Yudhishthira was walking along the banks of the Ganga, he saw in the forest Vidura, engaged in his vow, and having become lean and thin by his tapasya. Yudhishthira then exclaimed, "I am the king Yudhishthira, I am saluting you." The holy Vidura heard, but remained motionless like a log of wood. Within an instant, a wonderful halo came out of Vidura's face and entered the mouth of Yudhishthira, both of them being anshas of dharma. Vidura then died at that moment. Yudhishthira expressed great sorrow. So, what happened there? The light emitting from Vidura and entering Yudhishthira's mouth. So, Vidura died at that moment. There was an ansha of Dharmadeva in him and an ansha of Dharmadeva in Yudhishthira. So when the ansha of Dharmadeva became unattached from Vidura's body because Vidura's body died, it naturally merged with the immediately adjacent ansha that was in Yudhishthira. That's what happened there, since they were anshas of the same deva. When the body of Vidura was about to be set on fire, a celestial voice was heard. "O king, he was very wise, so he ought not to be burnt. You can go away as you like." This refers to the custom of, in Sanatana Dharma, certain sages are not cremated, but entombed in a Mahasamadhi tomb, so that their body might continue to radiate spiritual benefit to those who visit it. Thus, in India, you'll see many Mahasamadhi tombs of great saints. So Vidura was such a saint. Hearing this, Yudhishthira bathed in the pure Ganga and returned to the ashrama and informed everything in detail to Dhritarashtra. While the Pandavas were staying in the hermitage, along with the other inhabitants of the city who had come with them, Vedavyasa, Narada, and other high-souled munis came there to visit Yudhishthira at the ashram. Kunti then spoke to the auspicious Vyasa. "O Krishna," since recall, Vyasa's first name is in fact Krishna. His name is Krishna Dvaipayana, and Vyasa is a title. "O Krishna, I saw my son Karna only just when he was born. My mind is being very much tormented for him. So, O great ascetic, show him once to me. O highly fortunate one, you alone can do this. So, O Lord, satisfy my heart's desires." The reason she's saying only you can do this is because her son Karna is long dead. He's been dead 24 years at this point. Gandhari said, "O Muni, I did not see you while Duryodhana went to battle. So, O Muni, show me Duryodhana with his younger brothers." Again, this refers to the fact that Gandhara, because her husband was blind, in solidarity with him, took a vow to wear a blindfold for their entire married lives together. And so she has never seen her children. Despite the fact that she's not blind, she just wore a blindfold her whole life. But at this point, she wishes to be granted a vision of them. They too are dead. Subhadra said, "O omniscient one, I want very much to see the great hero Abhimanyu, dearer to me than my life. O great ascetic, show him once to me." That is her son, who also died in the war. Sutta said, Satyavati's son Vyasadeva, hearing their words, held pranayama, restrained his breath within him, and meditated on the eternal Devi, the force of Brahman, or the Shakti of Brahman. When the evening time came, the Muni invited Yudhishthira and all others to the banks of the Ganga. He then bathed in the Ganga and began to chant hymns in praise of the Devi Brahma Mayi Prakriti, resting on the Purusha, the dweller in the Mani Dvipa, Saguna, so with gunas at the same time transcending them. He prayed, "O Devi, when Brahma was not, Vishnu was not, Maheshwara was not, nor when existed Indra, Varuna, Kubera, Yama, and Agni, thou alone existed then. My salutation to thee. When there existed not water, Vayu, ether, earth, and their gunas, taste, smell, when there were no senses, mind, buddhi, ahankara, when there existed no sun, moon, nor anything, Thou alone existed then. So, O Devi, I bow down again and again to thee. O Mother, thou holdest all these visible jiva lokas in the cosmic Hiranyagarbha. Again, thou bringest this Hiranyagarbha, the sum total of linga shariras, or linga shariras are the subtle bodies of all creatures within the universe, with the gunas of sattva, rajas, and tamas to a state of equilibrium named samyavastha, and remainest quite independent and apart for the period of a kalpa. At that time, even those that are possessed of the power of great discrimination and dispassion cannot fathom thy nature. O Mother, these persons are praying to me to see their dead ones, but I am quite incapable to do that. So kindly show them their departed ones. While Vyasa praised thus the Devi Mahamaya, the Lady of the Universe, of the nature of universal consciousness, called all those departed ones from the heavens and showed them to their relatives. Then Kunti, Gandhari, Subhadra, Uttara, and the Pandavas became very glad to see their relatives come to them again. Vyasa, of indomitable valor, again remembering Mahamaya, bade goodbye to the departed ones. It seemed then a great magic had occurred. The Pandavas and the Munis bade goodbye to each other and went to their respective places. The king Yudhishthira talked on the way back from the ashram to Hastinapura, about Vyasa, and ultimately came to Hastina. Thus ends the 7th chapter of the 2nd skandha on showing the departed ones, and the Mahapuranam Srimad Devi Bhagavatam of 18,000 verses. Chapter 8. Suta said, on just the 3rd day after the Pandavas had returned to Hastinapura, the king Dhritarashtra was burnt up, together with Gandhari and Kunti, by a forest fire. Sanjaya went away at that time, leaving Dhritarashtra in the forest, his burnt corpse in the forest, on a tour of pilgrimage. The king Yudhishthira heard the news of this from Narada and was very sorry. Now, after 36 years after the Kuru family had become extinct, all the descendants of Yadu and the Prabhastirtha were destroyed by the Brahmana's curse. The high-souled descendants of Yadu, intoxicated by drinking wine, fought against each other and were extirpated in the presence of Krishna and Balarama. Balarama then quitted his mortal coil. The lotus-eyed Bhagavan Krishna quitted his life too, struck by the arrow of a hunter, to pay respect to a Brahman's curse. Vasudeva heard of Hari's quitting his mortal coil and meditated on the goddess of the universe within his heart and left his holy life. Arjuna became very sorry. He went to Prabhasa and performed the funeral rites of all of them duly. Seeing the dead body of Hari, Arjuna collected fuel and burnt his body together with his 8 principal wives. He burnt also Balarama's body with that of his wife Revati. Arjuna then went to the city of Dwaraka and removed all the inhabitants of the city when the whole Dwaraka city of Vasudeva was drowned in the waters of the ocean. While Arjuna was taking all the persons with him after getting out of Dwaraka, he felt himself very weak on the way, and therefore a band of robbers, known by the name of Abhiras, plundered all the wealth and all the remaining wives of Krishna, as indeed we read all of this just now in the Vishnu Purana as well. The remaining wives of Krishna, not the 8 main ones who died with him. Arjuna, of indomitable valor, after his arrival at Indraprastha, made Vajra, Aniruddha's son, the king of the place. Then the highly powerful, so in other words, what he did, Vajra, the son of Aniruddha, so Aniruddha, Krishna's firstborn son was Pradyumna. His son was Aniruddha, his son was Vajra, and Vajra survived in the line of Krishna. And so the Pandavas gave half of their kingdom to Vajra, the great-grandson of Krishna, whereas Parikshit inherited their other capital city, Hastinapura. Then the highly powerful Arjuna informed Vyasa of his powerlessness when Vyasa said, "O highly intelligent one, when Hari and you will reincarnate in another yuga, then your heroic strength will again be manifested." Hearing all these words, Pritha's son Arjuna returned to Hastina with a sorrowful heart and informed everything to Yudhishthira, the Dharmaraja. Hearing the extinction of the Yadavas and Hari's quitting his mortal coil, Yudhishthira wanted to go to the Himalayas and leave this world as well. He installed Parikshit, Uttara's son, who was then 36 years old, on the throne, and went out of his palace in company of his brothers and Draupadi, to the forests of the Himalayas. Thus the Pandavas, Prita's sons, reigned for 36 years in Hastina, and then quitted their mortal coils in the Himalayas. Hence the greatly religious sage king Parikshit governed with vigilance all his subjects for 60 years. After this, Parikshit went once on a hunting expedition to a dense forest and shot a deer. He then searched for the deer. It became noon, and he felt very thirsty, hungry, quite fatigued, with his body perspiring, when he saw a Muni merged in meditation. He asked the Muni where water could be had. But the Muni held at that time the vow of silence, so he did not give any answer. Seeing this, the thirsty king, influenced by Kali Yuga, became angry and raised a dead serpent by the fore end of his bow and coiled it round the Muni's neck. Even thus coiled with a snake round his neck, the Muni remained as before motionless in his state of enlightenment and spoke nothing. The king also returned home. Then the Muni's son, born from the womb of a cow, Sringi, a great ascetic, a fiery devotee of Mahashakti, heard of the above event while he was playing in the forest. His friends spoke to him, "O Muni, somebody has placed a dead serpent around the neck of your father." Hearing their words, Sringi became very angry, and taking water in his hand, cast a curse. "He who has coiled today a dead serpent around my father's neck, let that villain be bitten by the serpent Takshaka within 1 week from this day." One disciple of the Muni then went to the king in his house and informed him of the Muni's curse. Abhimanyu's son Parikshit heard of the curse pronounced by a Brahmin, and knowing it infallible, spoke to his aged counselors. "O ministers, certainly it is through my fault that I have been cursed by a Brahmin's son. Now find out and settle what it is to be done when the persons versed in the Vedas say that death is inevitable under these circumstances. Yet the wise ones should try their best to thwart this according to the Shastras. Many sages who are the advocates of taking steps to redress any act say that all the actions of wise persons are fructified by proper means. Their solution does not remain unsolved. Therefore, I am saying that the powers of manis, mantrams, and oshadhis, or herbs, are indescribable. If applied duly, do you think they will bear no fruit in this case? I heard that when a Muni's wife died out of snake bite, the Muni gave away the half of his life to his Apsara wife and made her alive again. It is not proper for the learned to depend on the maxim that what is inevitable must come to pass. One must try one's best to act for the living present. O ministers, have you seen any person in the heavens or in the world who remains idle depending on fate alone? Sannyasins have renounced the world, but they must have to go to the houses of the householders, whether they be invited or not invited. See again, supposing that the food of a person is brought to him unasked, and suppose it is thrown into the mouth by someone, can you conceive that food would go down into the belly from the mouth without one's effort of at least swallowing? Therefore, one should exert one's own prowess from the very outset. Though the intelligent ones should be satisfied with the thought, "What can be done? It is not ordained in my fate." When Parikshit said thus, the ministers asked, which Muni made his dead wife alive again by giving her half of his own life? And how did his wife die? Kindly describe these in detail. And the king said, Bhrigu Muni had a very beautiful wife, Puloma. In her womb, the world-renowned Chyavana Muni was born. Sukanya, the daughter of Sharyati, was the wife of Chyavana. In her womb was born a very beautiful son named Pramati. He was very famous. Pramati had his famous beautiful wife, Pratapi. In her womb was born the great ascetic son, Ruru. At this time, a person named Stulakesha, a religious, truthful man of great name, was practicing tapasya. O ministers, in the meanwhile, the chief Apsara Menaki held sexual intercourse with Vishvavasu Gandharva on the banks of a river and became pregnant. She went out from that place to the hermitage of Stulakesha on the riverbank and gave birth to a very beautiful daughter. Seeing this girl quite an orphan and very beautiful, the Muni Stulakesha began to rear her up and named her Pramadvara. This all-auspicious girl, Pramadvara, attained youth in due course when the Muni Ruru saw her and became smitten with passion. And thus, in the middle of this story, ends the 8th chapter of the 2nd skandha on the extinction of the family of Yadu and on the anecdote recounted by Parikshit in the Mahapuranam Srimad Devi Bhagavatam of 18,000 verses. I think that might be a good stopping point. We are kind of in the middle of the story, but the next chapter also kind of ends in the middle of a story. So I think this is probably as good a place to break as any. We'll move on with the story of Parikshit's death at the start of next time.
Awesome. Thank you, Devila. Amazing stories.
Thank you guys for coming.
Have a great week. Thank you so much, man. Hari
Yeah.
Om.
Hari Om, you too. Jai Ma.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming, Radha.